And so, this month we are going back to the basics of science of mind. Last week we talked about the thing itself, what Ernest Holmes, one of the many names he had for the divine, for spirit, for the universal presence, for God, whatever you want to call it. He often called it the thing itself. And we talked about the way that it is in, through, and as all creation. Today we're going to focus on how this actually works in our lives, how we can use the principles that we talk about here at Science of Mind and the understanding that we have for that divine spirit and actually affect change in our lives. You know, we all go through all kinds of experiences in our lives, and some of them we like and some of them we don't. And some of them we'd like to change, and some of them we'd like to have more of. And there's a way that we can go about doing that, and bringing more of that into our lives, the things that we really want to experience, and not so much of the things that we don't want to experience. Okay, why am I not working? Guess I'm not turned on. There we go. Well, Joe. Huh. I don't know why this isn't working. The way it works. There we go. We're going to be talking about something that we call the creative process and how we use that creative process to change the conditions in our lives and to bring more of the good stuff into our lives, the things that we really want. So if you remember the first week of the month when we did our building dedication, we read the Declaration of Principles. This is one of the declarations of principles that actually talks about this process here. This is number 8. I only have the first 3 memorized, so this one won't be quite as impressive. We believe that the universal spirit, which is God, operates through universal mind, which is the law of God, and that we are surrounded by this creative mind, which receives the direct impress of our thought and acts upon it. So we believe that we are surrounded by this universal presence, this universal spirit, God, the thing itself, whatever we want to call it. And it operates through another aspect of itself, which our founder Ernest called the law, among many other things. He liked words a lot. And it moves through this law that always does the same thing, that doesn't judge, that doesn't have any preferences or any condemnation or anything that it's going to make some people get and other people not get. It is impartial, the law, the universal mind. And it moves through that to bring about what we want to experience in our lives. Or sometimes the things that we don't want to experience in our lives, depending on how we're thinking. But it receives the direct impress of our thoughts. In other words, what we think, we put out into this universal mind, and then we begin to experiencing that in our lives. When I first started coming here, I heard a phrase that was absolutely probably the simplest thing I've ever heard, and yet the most profound in my life. And that phrase was, change your thinking, change your life. I had never up to that point, and I already had 1 master's degree and lots of other things aside from that. Never once in my life had I put together the thought that the thoughts that I have in my mind are creating the experience that I have. What I think becomes my reality. Until I heard that simple little saying, it had never clicked for me in such a way that I understood that if I changed how I believed about things, then the things that were happening in my life would change. And so that's the premise for how it works. It's a little more complicated than that. Ernest goes on to say, I don't know why I'm not working. Ernest goes on to say, we are a thinking, willing, knowing, conscious centers of life. We are surrounded by, immersed in, and there is a flowing through us a creative something. Call it what you will. The sum total of all of our thought, will, purpose, and belief creates a tendency in this law that causes it to react to us according to the sum total of our belief. You may have heard this written in the book of Acts in the Bible. In God we live and move and have our being. This is how we are connected with that universal presence. We are totally immersed in it. It is moving through us. There is no separation between it and us. We are all one, and it is constantly and ever changing in us, in our experiences, based on our belief, based on how we believe about things. So as I said, we call this the creative process. This is what Ernest describes, how Ernest describes the creative process. Spirit is the great causative power of the universe. The word or thought of spirit internally initiates the divine creative process. In this process, law is continuously set in motion to create, from the unformed substance, innumerable forms which follow the thought patterns of spirit. In a field of science called quantum physics, there is an idea that every single thing exists as a possibility, and that we are surrounded by waves of possibility, and everything is moving through the universe in these waves of possibility. No matter what it is, it exists in this idea. And as we put our thought to that idea, it collapses, is what the scientists call it, it collapses into our experience. It collapses into reality. In other words, it becomes the thing we think. And so as we're saying here, as we put our thoughts into that universal law, that field of intelligence that is always doing what it does, those things become our experience. So you may have seen a funny little symbol here before. People call this the science of mind symbol, but in actuality, it is a metaphysical teaching symbol. Ernest didn't create it. Our founder, Ernest Holmes, did not create this. Phineas Quimby used it about 4 or 5 decades before Ernest. Thomas Troward used it. Many other of the metaphysicians of the time used this teaching symbol. Ernest put it into our language and used it to explain this creative process. So spirit, God, the universe, has a triune nature, a threefold nature. In Christianity, they would call this the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Here we call it spirit, soul, and body. Now, on this chart, it's in kind of a hierarchical order, but the chart can be turned any way. So there's no one is better than the other in this chart here. It doesn't matter which way you look at it. It's still spirit, soul, and body. And so, spirit is that perfection, that universal presence, that thing itself, as Ernest says. In fact, he had lots and lots of different names for it. A universal mind, an intelligence that is the origin of everything. He also called it first cause oftentimes. In other words, it's the thing that initiates anything out there. You can put any other word in that section, any name for a spirit, any name for the universe, anything, whatever you want to call it. You can use any one of Ernest's 88 names that he used for it. Anything up in that section would be fine. It doesn't matter what you call it. It's that perfect idea. When we talk about the creative process in simple terms, we talk about the analogy between a seed, the soil, and a plant. So the seed would be that perfect idea. We would put it up in that top section there. That is that idea, that perfect idea that is out there on those quantum waves of possibility that exist out there. And then what do? We take that seed and we put it into the soil. We call this, I missed one, sorry. We call this the soul. And the soul is also sometimes called the law. And they call it the law because, the law is supposed to be impartial and non-judgmental and all of that other stuff. The law just works the way the law does. It doesn't care who is in front of it. It works the way it does, the same for everyone. So the soul or the law is that part of spiritual consciousness which receives the seed, receives that divine idea. And it begins to create the form that is going to be the product of that idea. So just like in the seed, soil, plant analogy, we put a seed into the soil. That soil doesn't care whether it's a tomato seed or a grape seed or an orange seed. It is always going to do what it does to seeds. Now, there are things that we can do to the soil to make it a healthier plant. And that's where all of our spiritual practices come in. We can clear out those things in the soil that don't belong anymore. All those hidden beliefs, those unconscious biases that we have, what Ernest called race consciousness ideas, all of those things that are operating in our experience and we may not be fully aware of them. When we start to become aware of them, we can clear them out. And then we can add good things to the soil. We can add more spiritual practices like meditation and prayer, where we begin to build a feeling of what is possible for us. And so, just like a good farmer, we have to tend our soil. The soil is always going to do what it does, but it works better when it's healthy, when it has the right ideas, when it has the right nourishment, and when it can actually begin to do what it does to that seed in the best way possible. And then we have the plant, the bottom, the body, what the Christians would call the sun. This is the manifestation of that idea. Whatever we put into there. So we plant that seed, that perfect idea of a tomato plant. And we put it in the soil, and we've tended our soil beautifully. And what is produced is a gorgeous tomato plant that we can actually use to nourish our bodies. As we begin to understand this process, we can begin to plant lots of different seeds in there and then have lots of different experiences in our lives. It sounds kind of easy when you think of it that way. There's I wouldn't say a catch, but maybe a caveat to that. It is done unto you as you believe. Master teacher said this many years ago. It's been written in almost every single faith tradition. There is some version of this. It is done unto you as you believe. As you believe. Here, as has two different meanings. When you believe and how you believe. Ernest says this: our belief sets the limit to our demonstration of principle, which of itself is without limit. When that seed is planted in that universal consciousness, in that mind, and then it is taken into the soil, it is full of potential at that moment. It's ready to fulfill everything because it's infinite. So it's not a question of its willingness nor its ability. It's entirely a question of our receptivity. Do you believe it's possible? Last week I talked about my movement through financial issues in my life. And when I used the affirmation, I have $1 million in the bank, there was not one thing inside of me that believed it was possible. Well, maybe one. I didn't have any faith behind it. Therefore, I wasn't manifesting that. I had to work at it from a different angle to make it work in my life. It is done unto me as I believe. As I open up to the possibility of it, as I begin to understand the nature of it and what is possible here, then I can begin to experience something different. And so again, we're going back to what is it we actually believe about things? What do we believe about spirit? What do we believe about this impartial law? And what do we believe is actually possible to have in our experience? Ernest says there are two aspects of consciousness. Thought plus emotion equals belief. In other words, it's done unto us as we believe. It is not necessarily done unto us as we think or as we feel, but unite those two together, and the result is a dynamic, creative powerhouse. Anybody want to experience that? A dynamic, creative powerhouse. If we can take what we know, our belief in spirit, our belief in the way that the creative process works, our belief in what is possible, and we can link that to a feeling, then the sky is unlimited. We can have whatever it is we want to have when we can link those things together, when we can actually begin to experience having that thing as a tangible feeling in our body. And we do this beautifully through some of our spiritual practices. One of them is visualization, which will allow us to take that thought and actually take it into us and begin to feel it through a contemplation, begin to feel that experience of having whatever that is that we want, or whatever it is that we need in our lives at that moment. In 2014, I went through a cancer experience. And so I decided that I was doing some mind-body work with people like Joe Dispenza and Bruce Lipton and Deepak Chopra, and actually beginning to look at, what am I thinking about that's causing this in my body? And so in some of Joe Dispenza's work, I was led to this meditation. And I don't actually think he ever said this. I think it's something I kind of combined with it. But, I was a science teacher, and I studied quantum physics, and I understand some of the principles of that. In quantum physics, there's this thing called the morphogenetic field. Now, the morphogenetic field is that place in consciousness, that place that can't be identified in our body, although it has to be there for this to work, but it's where the perfect cell for every organ in your body is made. Okay? There's this place in our body. We come together with a sperm cell and an egg cell, come together to make one cell. And then it begins to break up and divide and do all the things that cells do. And at some point, that one single kind of cell starts making other kinds of cells. So we start with heart cells, I believe, were one of the first to make. Brain cells, nerve cells, skin cells, all of this. They start to make. The prototype for those cells is in the morphogenetic field, according to quantum physics. So I did my communing with all of the cells in my body in the morphogenetic field, because I figured they were already perfect there. So let's have more of those in my body. I don't need to bring any other kind of cells that are not functioning properly into my body. I need to bring the good ones in. And so I had this thought, and I attached it to a belief that there is a power for good in the universe greater than I am, and I can use it to bring about a change in conditions. And I did. So I'm now, almost 10 years cancer-free. So we can use this process to change physical conditions. We can use it to change mental conditions. We can use it to change our finances, our relationships, anything that we have in our lives. We can use this kind of an idea, this process. If we take the thought and we link it to a tangible feeling, a belief, a way of being, we can actually begin to bring about a change in our lives. So how do we do this? So the first thing, you might want to do this. If you have something going on in your life right now, do this as I'm talking about it. You've got some kind of condition in your life that you might want to change right now. Think about the things that you would prefer to have, prefer to experience. Think about them in a way as if they have already happened. Think about it as if it's real, and see if you can build that feeling of what it would be like if this was true and real in your life. If you're doing this on your own, you might want to do a little journaling, or if you're like me, do a little artwork around it. Find some kind of way to explore it in a contemplative way to actually begin to build a greater feeling of it. really, really begin to feel as if it's done. And then step into that picture that you've created. I didn't step into the morphogenetic field. I brought the morphogenetic field into me. But it was the same thing. I brought it into my experience. And then I felt like what it was to have perfect, healthy cells in my body. And then I kept doing it. And you just keep doing it. Repeat it till you actually begin to see evidence of it. And once you see evidence of it, you want more of it. You want more and more and more of it. Because it is such a good feeling to see these ideas, these thoughts, these conditions shifting in your life. Think about it. Bring it into your experience until it actually becomes your real life. And then the last step is relax and enjoy it. And then when you're ready, you can move on to the next thing. Or if you were like me, I often did several things at once. I'm an overachiever. This thing works through us as it moves through us. It works in our experiences as we believe it is possible for it to work. When we believe it and how we believe it. Do we actually think this is possible? If you're saying something to yourself and you have that little voice inside of you saying, well, mine doesn't speak very nicely. It usually says bullshit. But you have a voice inside of you that's saying, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. If that's happening to you, then you've got some other work to do to clear that away. Because it will not work if you don't believe it. You've got to have some kind of faith behind it. This is where our practitioners can really help you. They can help you get to what's back of that belief. Through all of the training that they go through for the 4 years that they study, they learn to listen to you and listen to Spirit. And hearing both of those voices, they get a glimpse at what the hidden belief is that's operating in your experience. And then they're able to help you find practices that'll clear that away. So if you have that little voice that's saying, this is not possible, it's never going to happen, I really encourage you, if nothing else, put it in a prayer request. Our prayer is absolutely magical. It works across time and space. We don't even have to know your name for the prayer to be manifested. But it has to be something that you can believe, something that you can actually buy into. So Ernest says, then knowing that the thing can work for us only through us, let us begin to accept today more good than we experienced yesterday, and to know that we shall reap a harvest of fulfilled desires. Reap a harvest of fulfilled desires. And this is so much more than about bringing more good riches and so forth into our lives. That's part of it. But there is also a component about having a greater experience of life in general. This can work for our relationships. It can work for our finances. It can work for our jobs, our careers, our health. Any of these items, any life structure that you have right now that is not feeling quite where you want it to be, this is an opportunity for you to apply the creative process to it and see what kind of results you can get in your life. See what changes you can bring about through your understanding of this process. And again, we start with understanding what Spirit is. Understanding that there is this omnipotent, omnipresent, and, I forgot the third omni. Omniscient, thank you. I think I would have known that. Omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent. All-knowing, all-powerful, always available. It is there all of the time. We just need to tap into it. If you're having trouble tapping into it, go to our YouTube channel. There are thousands of maybe hundreds of meditations on there that will help you get in touch with Spirit. They will help you find that conscious connection. They will help you find that feeling, as Ernest called it, the fire. They will help you build that fire of understanding of your place in this universe and the nature of Spirit. Once you understand that, get clear about what it is you want. What do you want to experience in your life? And do your gardening work. Clean out your soil. Get rid of all the weeds and the sticks and the rocks and you don't want to get rid of the creepy crawlies, they're good. But get rid of all that stuff that you don't need in your soil so that your plant can grow beautifully. So there's lots of room for it to spread out and make the most magnificent result for you. Add in those nutrients, that water, the fertilizer, all the good stuff that it needs. Bring that in through your spiritual practices. And then sit back and get ready to reap the harvest that you've sown. It is a magnificent unfoldment of Spirit happening in your life right now. It is done unto you as you believe. Let's take this into prayer. Would the practitioners stand and surround the sanctuary, please? Holding us in consciousness throughout the entire week. We really appreciate all of your efforts. I like to pray with my eyes closed. If that works for you, please join me. Take in a nice deep breath as we begin our communion with Spirit. I know that right here and right now, there is only this one power and presence, this creative love intelligence that has brought forth everything into existence. It is the isness and the allness and the fullness of all life. It is the manifestation of everything that has ever been and everything that is yet to be. For Spirit knows no limitation and is continually outpouring itself into magnificent new creations. And because I know that there is only this one divine loving intelligence, I know that I am one with it. I know that the power that created the universe resides right at the heart of my being. And it is looking for an outlet through me all the time. And as I know this is true for me, I know it is true for each and every person. For we are all that perfect, divine emanation of Spirit. We are the beautiful, thriving plant that God has sown. And knowing this truth, I speak my word. I know that right here and right now, each one of us is fully immersed in that creative process. That the thoughts and the beliefs and the feelings that we have all enter into that creative medium, into that perfect soil, and produce the most magnificent results in our lives. I know that each one of us is fully capable of experiencing all of the good that is available in the universe. I know that our work is to clear away those things that limit our beliefs, that distort our thoughts, those things that we aren't even aware of, and those things we know that have been operating for years in our lives. We each have an opportunity to release them, to let them go. How good it is to know this, how good it is to see it happening in this community right now, and to know that it happens in the entire world. To know that each one of us is a place in consciousness through which the divine is pouring itself into form. I'm so grateful to know it, to feel it and to see it. And I just give great thanks. And I let it be. And so it is.